All right, everyone. Brooklyn Bernie Sanders kicking off his campaign in his hometown. It was good that he was honest about the fact that he was born and raised in New York City and not in Vermont, because a lot of people think he was born like in the Appalachian foothills. Here's this acid-soaked Grateful Dead listening hippie from the state of Vermont. He was mayor of Burlington because he's a Vermonter and he loves ice cream and stuff. And it gives him that sort of softened, like hayseed style socialist image. That's not Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is a wealthy urbanite. He comes from an upper working class family, and that is sort of an economic thing. We've got to understand Bernie Sanders was not in poverty, and yet that's all he ever talks about. And the reason why is he loves poor people. Because poor people, if their lives have been destabilized, then they're more easily suckered by his socialist ideology. Oh, no, I want to give you free stuff. Yeah, I know you're on hard times. I'll give you free health care, free education, subsidized foods. Really what he means is there's no such thing as free. There's no free meal ticket. The government doesn't have money of its own to spend. No, what he's talking about is he wants to take money, siphon it from productive private labor, tax it. The government, by the way, will take an extra cut of that and then give the remnant to the poor. That's what he really wants, would tell you if he was being honest. When he says, well, free healthcare, no. What you mean is higher taxes. Free education, no. You mean higher taxes. Oh, subsidized food, higher taxes. That's all he's talking about. More gun control. Okay, so you want victims to be abused more easily because criminals aren't going to listen to those laws. And then people are always talking about, well, look at Scandinavia, look at Denmark. When Denmark puts out a press release saying we're not a socialist nation because they're tired of Bernie Sanders lying to everyone. Oh, what about look at Venezuela? Yeah, they've got a disarmament down there. They had a lot of gun control years ago they implemented. Yeah, lots of gun control, subsidies and free, subsidized housing and free health. They've literally got the same things. Why are they so fucked up and Scandinavia's okay? It's because there's a core of capitalism within Scandinavia propping up their shitty socialism. Here's the thing. Let's say the government says, okay, we're going to take more money from the tippy tops. When it appropriates that money, steals it for itself, it is taking a large proportion of that money into itself before it disburses anything to the poor. The problem is that by adding the government middleman in the middle of a transaction between private entities, it inevitably loses efficiency. The more steps you have in an economic process, the less efficient it will be. The most efficient is two people creating a transaction. If you have a middleman, the government, especially at multiple levels, you're going to have several bureaus handling that money. Each bureau requires manpower, therefore it requires being paid. There are pensions involved. There are government healthcare plans that are involved. There's the upkeep, the maintenance, the construction of property involved. There's the time and labor that goes into processing things. And then and only then is what gets spit out dispersed to people, to the poor. The poor then take that money, go buy something. They're paying a tax. They're paying a sales tax. They pay their taxes and fees on the electricity that even if it's subsidized, okay, there's a fee on the electrical business. There's a fee on who delivers their oil or supplies their anything else, the plumbing company. Every time they undergo a transaction, the government has inserted itself in. Money is taxed 5 or 6 times before it gets to you. That's the inefficiency of bureaucracy, and it's a hallmark of interventionism and socialism. The less you have, the more efficient it is, to an extent. There does need to be a small core of centralization to process things and keep them going smoothly, or then you get basically the private market equivalent, which is corporate monopolies. But in our system, we've got both. The government allows all sorts of corporate vertical monopolies to exist, which strangulates the private market, even while it implements more and more bureaucracy, which strangles the public sort of systems. So the idea that Bernie Sanders comes in and says, okay, we're going to take more money from the rich, which isn't actually going to work. It's not going to come from big corporations. No matter what the marginal tax is, they will use tax havens and loopholes to avoid paying it. Who really gets snookered are the small and regional businesses. This dude has 3 or 4 pizzerias. On paper, he's a multimillionaire. He's going to pay that high tax rate, and he doesn't have the army of lawyers and accountants like Walmart or Amazon have to get around it. He is fucked. You would see the erasure of most small and regional business chains in this country under the sort of tax proposals that Bernie Sanders is making. One of the reasons that hasn't happened, why we have so many of the small business, we have a business culture that's fundamentally different from many other developed nations. The reason why that has become possible is specifically holding those tax rates down. And in many cases, and the liberals are instrumental in this, giving subsidies to small businesses. Like the state of Vermont gives a lot of subsidies, taxpayer money, again, inefficiently, to like local, like family farms, small single family businesses and stuff. What they should do is restructure the tax code to protect those businesses in the first place, and you wouldn't need that. And you'd have less bureaucracy and things would be a lot cheaper. But, you know, they don't want to do that because shrinking government is hard. Because it's all cronyistic. It's a bunch of bureaus and shit. What we need is Trump to pull a Ronald Reagan and refuse to sign off on any increase in the government budget for the next 6 years. That's what would really do it. Do whatever possible to destroy the bureaucracy in this country, and you'd see the economy really... Yeah, you think that 3% GDP growth is pretty good. No, you'd see 5%. We got plenty of room to grow. But that'll never happen so long as we have people like Bernie Sanders. And then it's really funny because people, again, they think of him as like the old hippie, sort of the harmless, kind of kooky dude. And he's kind of cool because he wants to give you free ice cream. He doesn't. No, he wants to take ice cream from someone who has ice cream and give it to you. And he's going to take a little bit each time. He gets a couple licks before he hands you the ice cream. That's how government works. That's why socialism inevitably always fails, especially in its purest form. That's basically what the Democrats are suggesting, and then they use shitty propagandistic newspeak bullshit language like, oh, it's social democracy, not socialism. At least Sanders is honest enough to call himself a socialist. Yeah, I'm a socialist. Hey, oh no, he's not a real socialist, say the socialists who are worried that he'll lose. Oh my god, it's not a good strategy to be honest with people. You should call yourself a social democrat like AOC does every other time. No, bullshit, he's a socialist. Absolutely. He liked the USSR. He likes Venezuela. Said great things about him until it became politically expedient not to. Why do you think that is? I remember there was a Salon article back in like 2013. Oh, Venezuela is true socialism. This is the way we should operate in the United States. People like Bernie think that way. It's not just a joke. It's not like, oh, you know, doom and gloom, these dystopian crazy commies. No, it's actually real. They're actually that dumb. I don't want him anywhere near the U.S. budget. I think it'd be a travesty. I think all the progress we've made, you know, it's like some Democrats are like, well, progress on our economy began under Obama. It's not just, okay, so progress from 2010 to now. Every single bit of it will be pissed away if Bernie Sanders actually manages to implement anything fiscal. The problem is the Democrats would clamor to do that and then browbeat. I guess they'd call people anti-Semites if they resist him because he happens to be Jewish or something. Now, Bernie Sanders doesn't know what it's like to go without food. Dude, half the time he was like jobless and in a commune and probably had, you know, some commie giving him a free can of beans. And then he becomes, in the 70s, he becomes a career politician and he never has to worry about where his meal is coming from. He doesn't understand what real life is like for the average American. He's never lived it. He's never been part of it. He never had to produce anything. He's a parasite. That's ultimately what Bernie Sanders is. A parasite who's capable of putting on a happy, cheerful face and saying things that only fucking fifth graders would take seriously. Oh, I want to give you free stuff. I want to give you free education. I don't want you to have to pay student loans. No, in other words, he wants to steal from productive individuals. Those evil, horrible, rich people. Yeah, by the way, I've sparred with so many Bernie Sanders and AOC fans about this. Again, I'm going to point out one final thing. The way our tax bracketing system works, if you want to have a 70% marginal rate on the tippy tops, those evil, really rich people who produce so many jobs and goods and services, if you want to give them that highest tax rate, you know, if you eliminate the loopholes, they just go overseas. So you can look forward to 20-30% unemployment in this company. That's number one. Number two, all of the other brackets below that will have to be scaled accordingly. So it's not just going to be the 10 million plus club. The people making $1 million a year, their marginal tax rate ends up at 60%. And then people like me that are doing well, we probably have to pay a 40%, you know, marginal tax rate. I can't afford that. Now, you can bet I'd be looking at land in Thailand at that point. Yes, I would consider leaving the country because there would be, between the federal taxes and the self-employment tax, by the way, for those of us that are fucking entrepreneurs and take initiative, and the state tax rate, and the fees, and services, and local taxes and fees. I'd be paying like 65-70% of my income. I'm not going to do that. Fuck you. No, I'm going to pay, I'd rather pay the near 0% tax rate, you know, in some other country. I'd rather move to the third world at that point. Yes, that's not a joke. I know every year people are like, well, if so-and-so gets elected, we'll leave. That's bullshit usually. Because normally what you get is a neoliberal. They're like, oh, I want to raise taxes. It's like a 2-point raise or something. Nobody gives a shit about that. People on the margins of poverty get their head shoved down a little. Then they throw subsidies at them. They do fine. And then you get like a Republican and, oh, well, I want, you know, a little more Jesus in the schools or something. It's not a big deal. What Sanders is proposing is to fundamentally overhaul our system and turn us into Venezuela. No, he's not like, oh, it's the Nordic model. Fuck that. The Nordic countries are propped up by a huge energy sector, high diversity of the economy, extreme high literacy and post-industrial infrastructure, and a lot of heavy industry in the very capitalistic sense. That core of hyper-capitalism buoys up their redistribution of states. I guess that would fit in more with social democrat as opposed to socialist. But Bernie Sanders isn't a social democrat. He's a socialist. Not that there's a big difference. I mean, social democrat is basically, a stepping stone towards socialism, which in turn is kind of a stepping stone towards communism. By the way, when I used an analogy that socialism and communism weren't the same, it was like comparing, what was it, I said syphilis to AIDS or something. That's more apt because it's not necessarily true that socialism devolves into communism. Sometimes it just remains socialism, but it's bad enough that it can kill you anyway. That's the whole point. It just takes a little bit longer to collapse. That's about all. Peace out.